Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. Welcome to a very special bonus book club episode. Today we get to delve into the Rachel incident. We meet Rachel, set on seducing her married professor, who then drafts in her best friend James to help her in her mission in this funny, poignant and addictive tale of friendship and impossible choices.
Caroline O'Donoghue is a New York Times best-selling author, as well as a journalist, screenwriter and host of the award-winning podcast Sentimental Garbage. She has contributed to Grazia, The Irish Times, Vice, BuzzFeed and The Times, and has written 6 books, including a YA supernatural trilogy and 3 adult novels. Upon publication, her debut novel, Promising Young Women, was shortlisted for the Irish Book Awards Newcomer of the Year and the Kate O'Brien Award. Her podcast, Sentimental Garbage, is a joyride for lovers of pop culture, with episodes dedicated to deep diving into music, movies, TV shows, books, and more that society has made us feel ashamed of loving. Her latest novel, The Rachel Incident, was published by Virago in June and is currently in TV development with Universal and Pageboy Productions. As expected, I was unbelievably excited to have Caroline on the podcast and therefore butchered the original intro. So here we go, on to the incredible Caroline O'Donoghue. Welcome to A Pair of Bookends.
Hello, I'm so thrilled to be here.
We are so thrilled to have you on. And listen, when I tell you that Hannah is the most excited person in the world right now, it is not an understatement at all.
It's not.
So we always love to open with just a really easy question, which most people get very stumped on. But that is, what are you currently reading?
That is very easy. I am just finishing the last couple of chapters of Fleishman is in Trouble. So actually, I was in a bookshop today and I was like, waiting for what's my next thing going to be? And I just picked up The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. So yeah, I'm very much, it's a genre I've taken a break in for a long time, but that very kind of New York-y kind of wry, like I was walking down Fifth Avenue and talking to my friend who's an oncologist kind of thing. That like, I often, like every few years I go through these phases of reading a lot of books like this. And then I just like, look, if I hear about one more bagel, but right now it feels like a very summery thing to be into for some reason.
Yeah, Lydia has just finished a romantic comedy and was absolutely raving about that, and we're very much like going into the world. I mean, that's LA though, isn't it? But that's the world of SNL.
But it's
very
New York
much
and
about
LA.
Yeah.
I loved that book. It was so fun, wasn't it?
Oh, it was just, honestly, I went into it not really knowing what it was about, and I've never read any Curtis Sittenfeld before.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of like, I got the proof copy. So I was like, just go for it. And the proof is like bright white, like nothing on a cover, nothing to give it away. And within about, 5 pages, I was like, this is the best thing I've read all year. Like, this is fantastic. It was so incredible.
It's so, I find it fascinating how that book is being published, because I loved it so much. And I love her a lot as well. And like her first book was American Wife, which was like this huge, like, it's like a fictional biography of Laura Bush, and it was like won all these awards and whatever, and she's done loads of different things, but like this is such a commercial romantic fiction thing, and like it's such a moment for commercial romantic fiction, but the way they've published it is very sleek and literary. I feel like it's in the way it looks, and it's like, it's interesting like how different writers writing within the romantic genre are interpreted, I guess,
Yes, absolutely. It feels like a very kind of, I think if you were to walk into a bookstore and were looking for what the content of that book was, you wouldn't look where it is usually placed.
Because the cover almost looks like something, it should be like a Joan Didion or something,
It's like a woman, she's in a convertible car, it just screams literary fiction, and it's just a fantastic romance. It really is.
I cannot wait to get to that. Now, I mean, I've not read it, but it is on my table.
What are you reading?
Oh, well, I've just finished your book, which, funnily enough, has just become, as I wrote on my Instagram last night, it's become my whole personality now. That's it. I was literally so obsessed with it. Like, and I have to be asleep by midnight. I sound so lame, but like I have to be asleep by midnight if I want to be a functioning human being the next day. And I could not like put this down. Like I literally could not. So like a couple of nights ago, I was awake till like 2 a.m. reading it. And I was like, I've got work in the morning, but I was like, I don't care. Like I can't put this down. It's just so good.
Thank you so much. That's so kind.
No,
That's
honestly,
so nice.
It's amazing. And before I get into it, because as I've already said, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I'm going to be really cringe and just thank you really, because yours and Dolly's Sentimental in the City spin-off got me through like a really shitty mental health period. So like during lockdown, like that final lockdown, an acting job that I had was sort of like postponed and just everything was going to shit. And it seems like such a small issue in comparison to what people were going through, but I was just really struggling. And I was having therapy every week over Zoom, and I would have therapy on Zoom. And then after therapy, I'd be like, feel really heavy right now. So I would go to the coffee shop, get a coffee, and then just go for a walk with you and Dolly in my ears talking about Sex in the City. And it just like, it really helped me through that time. So I'm just like such a huge fan of yours. I love your podcast, and I'm just so grateful that we've got you on. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That's really kind. And you know what? I'm so touched and grateful for that. And like it's so funny when you think back on that time. And like when people tell me like thank me for that podcast because they were going through whatever kind of time they were going through during the pandemic, the only thing I can ever think to say is like, yeah, it really saved my life too. You know, it was such a grim time. And also it feels lovely now that some serious time has passed between then. Like it's been a while now, and to always to be like part of a cluster of pop culture that people devour during that time. It's like, oh wow, I get to have something in common with like Dua Lipa. It's like,
yeah.
or you know that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show that we all watched, like, or The Queen's Gambit. It's like we all have something in common, and that's something kind of nice about that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, just quickly, what are your thoughts on Aidan being back?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I don't have anything massively original to say other than like I don't like the look of that like hunter jacket and purple cords. But do you know what? We've just been burned so much before with the like him returning for the second film for like a real non-storyline. But then it appears as though he's going to have a real story on this one.
Yeah, I just feel like he lingers like a bit of a bad smell, and I'm just like, well, I'm over him. I'm over it.
We're all over it. Yeah,
I'm over it.
Don't care. Like, and it's kind of interesting because the show itself is, you know, the producers and all that, they try to insist that like, oh no, it's a Sex and the City story. We have perfect faith in these new characters we created, which is why we keep like resurrecting Aidan Shaw. And it's like, you clearly don't have faith in the characters you've created. I tell you what, I am interested in though the Brady and Lily thing that they're hinting.
Yes, there's a little look going on in the poster, and I was like, there's something there. I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah,
but I'm hoping that you and Dolly are going to give us another series.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, we'll probably do the same thing again. Well, we'll wait like 7 months to cover it. Just out
Love
of
it.
like rantiness.
I would listen to you two chatting about anything. So yeah, thrilled with that. Now,
is this a bad time to admit that I've never seen Sex and the City?
I was watching your face there, and I was like, I suspect we have a heathen in the
Lydia,
house.
this is like make or break. Like,
listen, I'm up for it. I just have never delved.
It's fine. You can have like save that space in your brain for other things. It's like the rest of us, we have an illness and we can't help it, and we're basically all in a support group together, and it's fine.
True. Oh my god. Okay, I have to talk about the Rachel incident because, as I said, it's now my whole personality, and it's just amazing. And I was listening the other day to a podcast that you did with Angela Scanlon. I think it's the Thanks a Million podcast.
Oh yeah,
and you were talking.
It was a nice time. Yeah.
It was that was last year, wasn't it, that you did that?
Yeah.
And you were talking about the fact that it was just so weird that you were hinting at this book and kind of sort of touching on it, but not like giving any big ideas away about it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm getting to read this now. That's so cool. But you were talking about the fact that you had to delete 75,000 words of a novel that you were working on in order to start this. And I wanted to hear about what that experience was like and how you sort of found yourself in the world of the Rachel incident.
That's a great question. Yeah, I had this book contracted. I had sold the idea that it was based on a short story that I had written a few years previous. And like when authors are selling novels based on short stories that they've already written, you know that the inspirational well is fairly dry. But you know, it was kind of like a sort of Black Mirror type feminist office novel, and I had been excited about the premise. And then I signed this deal for my young adult trilogy, and trilogies are an enormous amount of work, and like not just on a plotting level, but also on a delivery level. You know, because young people, you sort of have to get those books on the shelves while the first generation is kind of old enough to be interested in them. So it's like something you're interested in when you're 15 isn't going to be the same thing you're interested in when you're 18. You know. So I was really on a punishing schedule for that. And so I pitched this book. I then kind of went away and wrote this trilogy. And then it's like, by the time I got back to this book, I was like, oh, okay. And then I kind of plugged away at it and was going and going. And like, there was definitely good writing in it. And it was like funny. And I think it did make some points that I wanted to make. But the further we got into the pandemic and the more I kept tinkering with it and just dumping words into it, the more I realized that I was writing a kind of a book that I love to read, but it is not my destiny to write. And the kind of book I mean is a sort of like, it's almost like the kind of New York books I was like gesturing to earlier, this thing of like just cool women having mean thoughts, you know. It's just like sort of slightly a bit disgusted with everything, quite not sarcastic, I don't know, cynical, whatever you want to call it, just, you know, funny, but not ha-ha funny really. More ha-ha depressing. You know, like on the cover of like some books, they're like, it was darkly funny, and then you open it up and it's like 3 people have died, you know. And not only was it tonally the wrong thing for me, it was also the plot, all the stuff about sort of like, you know, girl boss feminism and the sort of capitalism as it intersects with ideological movements. It felt the deeper we got into the pandemic, it was like, who cares? Like who actually cares? Like you're really gonna write a novel that's like, oh no, phones, you know, when phones are literally the only thing keeping society together at that particular point in time. You know, we had just organized like this mass vaccination of everybody on the fucking planet, and we're gonna be like, oh no, the phones, like, okay. Anyway, so I was sort of spinning my wheels on that and going a bit mad, and this was like February 21, and the book was due May, and I was like, I can't, I've done 70,000 words of this novel. Not only can I not finish it, I cannot redraft it, because like you write a novel and then you write it 3 more times, you know. And I was like, and also I can't sit on a podcast in 2 years time and pretend to be in love with this either, you know. Like, so I was like, okay, I have to write something that first of all, I don't have an excuse to research, because that was another problem I had fallen into, was that I kept going on these weird research trips because I obviously didn't believe in the idea itself. So I just kept like researching. So I was like, you can't research anything. It has to make you happy, and it has to be done in 11 weeks. And that's when the Rachel incident happened. Which is so weird, because it's like not even out yet, and it's already like probably done better than anything I've ever written by virtue of just like getting like Book of the Month in Ireland, and like it's getting like a Indie Next thing in the States, and it's like getting this wide release. So it's like it's weird, something that hasn't sold a single copy has already in theory sold more copies than I'll ever sell, which is one of the weird things of publishing, like you can never get your head around. But it's like I was thinking back to this time when I was 19, and I lived 1920 when I lived with my best friend Ryan, and at the time he was in the closet, and we just had this really like beautiful, like codependent, mad relationship that we still have. And I just wanted to like center myself back in that time period, because it was just a time when I was really happy and there was loads of possibilities and things up in the air. And then as per like the plot and everything else, it's just totally just made up fun soap opera, you know. And I ended up writing about things I really cared about and stuff that's like defined my youth, like abortion care. Like I've never had an abortion, but if you're an Irish woman, abortion is part of your identity in a way that is kind of hard to describe, and I wanted a way to describe it in the novel as well. So it was like a sort of a mixture of just the things I love and the things I care about,
Yeah, and I think just what you were saying there about sort of the abortion situation in Ireland, I just thought you highlighted that so well in the book, because you explored it in a way that really kind of represented the complexities of like young female sexuality in Ireland, and how like the book, has these really like sexy sex scenes, and there's like these passionate sex scenes and stuff, but I feel like there's always going to be that undercurrent of like guilt and shame that's sort of like linked to things like religion, and linked to the potential of having to go through an abortion and all that kind of stuff. So the stakes are actually like really high in terms of sex and stuff like that, and I just thought you explored that so well, because it is an incredibly heavy topic, and it's something that we're still seeing people fighting around the world.
Well, thank you so much. And like I'm glad that you thought that, because there's a point where like these are very silly characters. They're fun characters. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not necessarily silly of themselves. Like they take themselves seriously, and like they're thinking, feeling people, but they're mostly just want to have a good time,
Yeah.
And I think like having people who just want to have a good time but also want to have an abortion is an important thing to view. And also this is bit where so Rachel, she's sort of like all gung-ho to have an affair with her married professor, which she never gets to have, and she sort of was trying to describe the appeal to herself, and she's like, she kind of links it back to the fact that she didn't want a boyfriend. She did want to have more casual sex, but she was so afraid of like the scourge of what casual sex would mean in her small kind of Irish city, and like what it would mean to be known for that in a sort of like, even though it's 2010 Ireland, it's still got this kind of very conservative idea of femininity, and it's almost like that's almost how she lands on like, well, an affair with a married man would solve all my problems, So like, even though these characters do think of themselves as very liberated, and certainly we thought of ourselves as liberated when we were, in 2010, there's still this shadow that kind of hangs over everything.
Absolutely. I know we're talking about quite a heavy subject, but I do want to do a little segue into what is my favourite thing about the whole book, which is the setting in a bookshop. I work in a bookshop.
Oh, right.
And I cannot believe how accurately you capture it. It is absolutely hysterical, whilst also like, oh yes, that is my life. And I think that it's such a brilliant place for her to work, a brilliant place for them to be set. What was it that inspired you to choose a bookstore, and how was it going about building that world for them?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you said that, because I've never actually worked in a bookshop.
You wouldn't know.
Really? So what I did work in is me and Ryan, we actually met. He was a Christmas temp, and I was a full sort of permanent member of part-time staff at a HMV. So I mean, a kind of a bookshop. It certainly had books. And actually it was something he sort of said to me over the years, where I kind of asked him, I was like, why was I the first person you came out to? And he said, we worked in soundtrack. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, the bit of the shop that we worked in together, it was like easy listening, classic jazz soundtracks, all the kind of genre stuff that old people like was shoved upstairs. And we were upstairs together in this like big shop. And he's like, the only thing we could put on the player every day was CDs from that section. So we would end up putting on like, the 9 to 5 soundtrack, or the Hairspray soundtrack, or the Grease soundtrack. And he was like, it was this little place where my queerness could kind of flourish, and it was like this safe little zone for us. And I was like, oh wow, that's lovely. And I almost kind of wished I could put that in the book, but I didn't want to. I knew if I said it in like a HMV or a CD or a music shop, it would be too firmly within my own experience. So I said it in a bookshop, and then I realized because I knew going in it was going to be an English professor, and I thought like, oh, sort of English professor with the unreadable book that he's trying to launch ends up being this like really fun place, because like I think there's an awful lot of, you know, I think Rachel says it in the book. She says, you know, I've read a lot of novels about the terrible things that happens to girls when they try to fuck their English professors, but never about the terrible things that happens when they don't fuck them. And so yeah, so it's like I think when we read those sorts of stories, it's always like, and he, you know, as he graded my paper, I lay back toplessly or whatever. And Rachel would love that. She would love that. But like having it this like putting Dr. Byrne in this vulnerable position of like having to ask for promotion for his shit book, which he sort of firmly believes is great, made him into like a person and like someone you sort of almost feel sorry for. And it's like, and this thing where she's like, she feels domineered by him, but she also feels empathetic for him. And it's kind of a nice silly, lovely, soft place to have that initial seduction happen. I'm so glad that you thought it worked.
Absolutely, and I loved there's a brilliant moment, and this is at the start of the novel, so it's not a spoiler, but where like she's on the computer like making up fake customers that have ordered his book in, and I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like the amount of times I've been like, I love this book, but no one wants it, so I'll just like create a few.
Oh,
on it.
Totally. But I used to do that with CDs. Because like Cork was a small city, but like people, like gigs still happened there. So I thought if we could like generate enough interest within the shop, we could, you know, form some kind of chain reaction, which so
like
silly
you would
to
have
think.
the influence over the rest of the country. Like somehow me ordering one extra book in is going to somehow make them be like, this is the book we should put as our book of the month next month.
you so think when you're that age that you're in that kind of control. Like when you were working in that HMV in Cork, because it was the only HMV in that part of the country and therefore the largest CD shop in like that half of Ireland, we really thought we made Mumford and Sons happen. Like stop. We genuinely thought we were responsible for that for about 3 years.
I knew it was you.
Well, that is the ego that comes with like, it's like being what I really enjoyed writing is the kind of weird big fish small town thing of like working in retail in a kind of cool place, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing, just with you speaking about yourself and your friend Ryan working at HMV, and it's something that I think you do so well is nostalgia, and I think you write that really well. And you obviously, I know through your podcast that you do nostalgia really well because you're reflecting on all these like huge cultural things, you know, TV and films and all that kind of stuff, and you know, sort of the things that we choose to cling to and the things that we have to let go of. And Rachel seems to sort of feel at times like she's nostalgic about the life that she's like currently living, which I found really interesting about her. And I wanted to kind of ask, what drew you to exploring that period in a person's life, you know, sort of like on the cusp of adulthood?
Well, it's interesting what you just said about, I hadn't really put together out until right now that like I do work a lot with nostalgia in general, and both with the book and with the podcast. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to put the Rachel Incident is the first book I've ever written in the past tense. And I found, and you know, this kind of thing of this character looking back on, you know, she's in her mid-30s, she's looking back on her early 20s. And what's really fun about that is that I think when you're living, I've written a few novels that are like 20-something women living their present tense life as it happens. And I think when it's all coming at you wave after wave, and certainly lots of stressful things happen to you in your 20s, typically, just feels like the most crushing, sort of like, it's blow after blow. It's like you can't get a job, boyfriend's not nice to you, whatever, all this stuff. And it feels like it can really crush you. And I think then having a character look back on that time and be like almost being her own big sister and being like, oh God, love her, like she didn't know, you know what I mean? And I think, and I really hoped that like there's some terrible things happen in this story and some upsetting things happen in this story, but like I really hoped that, and I know that most of my readership are like millennial women, or maybe like slightly, you know, not maybe Gen X, maybe slightly older Gen Z, but like I wanted them to be able to look back on their own 21-year-old selves and be like, God love her, you know, like just she didn't know, you know. I often, when I think about like nasty boyfriends I had or whatever when I was young, and I sort of internalize a sense of shame that I would like go out with somebody who treated me like that for like 7 months or something. I always kind of say the same thing to myself, which is like, you try telling that girl not to have sex with that guy. It's like she wanted to. She leave her go. She wanted to, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I think I'm so in many ways this book is the product of brain surgery, and the brain surgery is me doing that podcast for several years, and slowly I'm like, I've rewired my brain through hundreds of hours of talking about like so-called low culture, and telling myself and the people who I talk to that like, no, the things you like are good. Do you know what I mean? Like, and all these little facets of things are actually good, and trust your instincts. Your taste is good. You are good, you know? And I think that spirit is probably most alive in Rachel Incident more than any of my other work.
Totally. I just love the way that you wrote about that, and about like how, like you said, it is crushing, you know, trying to navigate that period of your life, and you don't know what you want. Like you literally, and I really got a sense of that with Rachel. You know, she's like, do I want to go to London? Do I want to like go into publishing? Do I want to, like, she doesn't know, like, just do I want to have this affair? Like that might be fun, but like, and like you said, like she just kind of wants to have a good time. I love that you have the character looking back on herself, because it's rare that we get to see that, and being like, you know, God lover, like you said, because we all make foolish choices. And, you know, I still cringe when I look back on like arguments I had with ex-boyfriends and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, like, why did I say that? Like, why did I do that night? And it's just like, but that was past me. Like, that's not who I am now. Like, I would never do that now. I would never say those things. And there's like a moment in the book where she says something like, she's having an argument with Carey, her boyfriend, and it's like a really big blowout row. And she says something like, I wish I'd had like the strength and character of it to have said something nice then, or to like, she basically wished she'd not gone about it in the way that she did. And I think we've all been there. So that relationship breaks my heart in places, because there's like, they just don't know how to have arguments yet with each other. And you can, so it's like, there's a bit where like she's told him that she doesn't have enough money to go out, and then he sees her out, and then he thinks that she's embarrassed by him, but she's just like, I'm obviously mad about you. And then like not realizing that like you have to do more things than just telling someone you're mad about them to make them believe that you're mad about them, you know. I really feel for those kids. I feel like that is like my kryptonite, is like stuff exploring people's piss poor communication skills. I
So the novel was made for Biddy. Like, it's so good.
I love it.
I mean, I don't know what you girls are talking about really, because I'm just the perfect person. Obviously, I know exactly how to communicate with everyone at all times. Which, if you know me, is a complete lie. But I found that the book, what I loved about the book was that it tackles these really quite, for you know, want of a better word, like heavy issues, you know, these things that we look upon and we think, oh my goodness, I don't know how I tackle that. And particularly for me, it was about, you know, queerness and finding your place in the LGBTQIA plus community, and how to live like that when you are not out, but you are aware of yourself, but you're just not ready or whatever. What was it about that particular subject? I know you've talked about your friend and things, but what was it about that particular subject that you wanted to explore with this book?
It's an interesting question, and I've never thought about it actually, because I think what's a big part of my draw for this book was that, like, so my first book, Promising Young Women, was a sort of story about like office sexual sort of politics, which had a very kind of predatory relationship at the center of it. The second book was told from the perspective of a queer woman who was like a very complicated relationship with her best friend. The trilogy then, mostly women, mostly female characters, and then the main romantic sort of lead is somebody who's non-binary. So the kind of queer dynamics were very much alive in all of my work, and that's never been like, I always get like, oh, represent, like, I always like weird about like accepting too much kind of like many compliments or something about like, oh, diverse characters, because like it should just be one of those things that's not even, I feel like it's really boring. It's like sorry, I'm not expressing myself very well. But then when I got to Rachel, I realized I had written 5 books and not talked about men at all. Like at all, like not in any significant way, and particularly loving men, like loving straight men, loving gay men, loving older men, loving fat men, loving skinny men, loving small short men, like men and men have been the great loves of my life, so in all the ways that it's possible for them to be. And I really wanted to explore all different kinds of masculinity and how it's expressed with that, and within that queer masculinity. And yeah, I hope I did a good job, really. And I think closeting is a really interesting thing. And when I was writing this, I was seeing Ryan a lot, and I was sending him like a couple of chapters every week or so, and he was so supportive, and he helped me so much. And he couldn't have gotten written without his kind of consent in some places and his encouragement in others. But I was stuck on, I was like, how does Fred, who's the professor who falls in love with James, Rachel's best friend, how would he react to James coming out? I'm like, I'm still kind of stuck on that bit. And then Ryan said like, oh, well, he's alone now. He's alone in the closet. It was him and James, and now it's just him. And I hadn't really thought of that. I was like, oh yeah, like, you have this idea of like when queer people come out that other queer people root for them, but not when they're marooned in this sort of island by themselves. And I thought it was fascinating, and I just wanted to include all of it,
Yeah, it was so well done, honestly. I think for me as well, it was very refreshing. And I mean, hopefully this is not just a trend, and it is going to be something that then continues to develop in literature at the moment. But it felt very just kind of natural and part of the narrative. It's not a device, it's not a anything like that. It's not like you were saying, like about representation or anything like that. It's just these people that exist in this world.
This is exactly, thank you for enunciating that better than I could, because I feel like I was tripping over my words a minute ago. But yeah, like I do feel like the more, like I want to have incredibly diverse books that like include like many different points of view, and also diverse authors who write them. And even calling them diverse authors feels so like unbelievably fucking condescending. But I also don't want us to live in this world where we're like congratulating each other on our representation and diversity, that like it becomes so singled out and becomes a trend. Like, I remember reading this quote from Naomi Campbell once, where she says something like, I don't want to see all black runways, I want to see black models working alongside white models, alongside Asian models. Like, I want there just to be more diverse runways generally. I don't need to see an all black runway, which I kind of, I guess I feel the same about publishing. And you must too, as a bookseller, you must see these, big signs go up being like, this is the queer section, this is the queer, whatever. It's like, you kind of want, and that's great, but you also want to move to a place where it's the everything section,
This is it. And it's like, I think personally I bulk against things like, let's have a queer section, because to me, I want to be able to pick up a book and it be a love story, and me not care who it is a love story about. It's just going to have the stuff that I want in it, that and this is definitely a book that has those kind of elements in terms of like, it doesn't need a sticker on the front showing what it represents, because these are just people living in the world and navigating the world in the best way possible. And in my kind of like utopian bookstore, these books are just amongst everything else. There is no distinction between a love story between heteronormative people and also a love story between anybody. It should just be, what are you looking for? Do you want a romance? Here's a romance.
And I hope now that, like, because that's like definitely in the YA space, it's so beautifully diverse or whatever, that like Gen Z are just gonna, I think it already happened really, like they've already grown up reading love stories from all different kinds of perspectives and persuasion, and they're going to be the people who work in publishing and work in bookshops and shape things, and like, so I think it is really going to change. I think publishing is such a changeable industry. It feels different to film and music in that way. Definitely film, in that it's really malleable, and people who are in it for the most part don't make that much money. So it's like you have to really love it. You have to really want to make things good.
And you know, talking about that generational thing, like my daughter's favorite book at the minute is called I Am Not a Prince. It's about a frog, and she's only 3, but it's about a frog who discovers their identity, and you know, is very happy being a frog princess. And I think that now that we're starting to see that trickle down, I'm hoping that it means a lot of great things for, you know, future generations in terms of feeling open to write about whatever they want to, you know. But yeah, I think this is a perfect book for people looking for that kind of content.
I mean, James Devlin is just a fucking great character. Like, I feel so precious about him. And you know, speaking of love stories, like their friendship feels like the great love story of the book, and it is really. I mean, you can really get a sense of like your own friendships in there, and that you've had these really powerful, meaningful friendships. And yeah, I just thought it's just so beautifully written, and I love the sort of camaraderie between them, just like their dialogue and their back and forths. It just feels so like vivid and real. And I think there was, I actually folded down the page. There is a moment between them, and I'm just going to read it. James's fascination with my middle classness has not changed since the day we met. And sometimes I wonder if his entire friendship with me is based on some urge to catalogue the precise livelihoods of dentists and their children. A sample question that might come at any time of the day or night. Does Bridget serve the carrots cut into circles or strips? Strips. I'll write back. Knew it. Comes the response. It's so good. I don't know it's so good. And it was just like perfect. Like, I don't know how you managed to do these little one-liners. Like, your humor's so great, and you just managed to like capture like the smallest details of in things. And I just want to know, like, how do you do that? Like, how have you got such a keen eye for detail, or such like a knack for
I don't know, but it's really nice that you think so. It's really nice. You know, it's lovely. No, I thank you so much. That's so nice. And there's nothing nicer in the world than having somebody read back a bit of your work that, you know, it kind of spooks me every time, because it's like, well, I was alone in a room during the pandemic writing sentences, and now this girl is reading back the sentences. And it's magical, and it's lovely, and thank you so much. And I don't know how to answer it all.
No, that's fair, but it's just it's what makes the book so funny. For all of these one-liners, like, there were so many times where I'm just cackling to myself, and that's why I didn't want to put it down, because like my job's really stressful at the moment, you know, there's all sorts going on, but I'm just like, this book just gave me such a break from like any kind of like life stress. It just was like, such a break, and I just felt like totally immersed in their world and in their friendship, and I kind of felt like a little part of it. And I really miss those characters, so God knows how it must feel for you having to let them go.
I do feel that way. I do really love them all, and like there's only, I think, 6 characters in the book. Something like that, like real characters, and I do think about them all the time. And like I find myself thinking, I was like, if Carey were that way now, he'd probably get an ADHD diagnosis, and he'd have gotten his shit together much earlier, but he couldn't, so he didn't. And it's so nice. But with James and Rachel's dialogue in particular, because like from the get-go, their relationship is just so silly. I really wanted to create this world where it's built of all these private jokes, and you have to get the sense that even the private jokes you're not seeing, are there. There's I think at one point it drops that like they have this sort of thing of like pretending to be Southern ladies kind of thing. But you also know that that's like part of a bigger infrastructure, and they've talked about like the Southern where they live and like whatever. And I wanted to sort of be able to build those like little like twigs of straw that are a private joke with your friend, or texting your friend about their mom in the middle of the night or whatever. And then once you put all these like little twigs and pieces of straw together, you're like, oh wow, like you've built a nest. Like it's like something that will genuinely like like catch you and cradle you. And like when Rachel does fall, James is the person who catches and cradles her, you know, and like they show up for each other in ways that are like you would struggle to show up for a sibling, you know, like not just physically but like financially. Like they, you know, at one point he sort of, sorry, I won't spoil it for, but like but sums of money are involved, and they are both incredibly gracious and generous about it. And I think there is a tendency as well to show straight women and gay men in media as having like an ultimately sort of like shallow relationship or something. I think it's a real sort of pet peeve of mine that like it's a relationship that is so new in terms of like media openly acknowledging that kind of dynamic. Like, but yet we make ourselves feel sort of like bad about it, or sort of we're so kind of like, oh god, it's the straight woman and her like token gay best friend accessory or whatever, without really analyzing the nuances of it at all. And it really irritates me. And and I think what's fun about this is, if anything, like, I mean, Rachel is literally the accessory in this. So she's an accessory in this kind of larger crime that's happening. So I mean, I wasn't really answering any question, just sort of ranting. But thank you.
Always here for a rant. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed was the kind of juxtaposition between James and between Dr. Byrne and, you know, and the men in Rachel's life. What did you want to kind of give the reader by having these two different guys in her life?
Well, there's three guys in her life, really. There's Byrne, and there's James, and then there's Carrie. Like I think there's this thing with Byrne where it's like she's attracted to him, and in the way you kind of always are attracted to male teachers, just as like a de facto kind of thing. But like I don't think she ever really thought she was going to do anything there. But I think it was also like she wanted to be him more than she wanted to be with him, you know.
Can I just say there's that great line that she says about Dr. Byrne's wife, where she comes into the shop and she looks all dainty and stuff, and she goes like, oh fuck you teeny deeny, I'm gonna fuck your husband for that.
Just on that basis, we're gonna fuck your husband.
Like that's the level of seriousness we're talking, just so the listeners are clear. Like
like as if she thought she had any control over that as well. It's so funny. Just for that. You're totally uninterested husband who doesn't think about me at all. And I liked it. There's a bit as well where when Dr. Byrne comes into the shop to check on the pre-orders for his crap book, and she says something like mildly funny, and he sort of laughs and looks at her, and her first thought is, fuck me and I'll say more things. And I love it. It's like, I think actually it's occurring to me now through that question, so it must be a great question. It is that I think Rachel is somebody who really thrived in secondary school, like when things were like really straightforward, and it's like you could, you know, tests were very simple, not simple, but they were structured. And I think she's somebody who, and it's a way she's very different to me, she really thrives on structure. And I really pictured her as being like a pretty, like a solid A student, shiny hair, like always has the right like pens and pencils, like not an overachiever, but like doing good, you know. And I think she really misses teacher approval and you know, that direct thing of, you know, whatever, the shiny kind of polish of that sort of world. Because like even when you do an English degree, it's so much of it is essay based, and you never really get that much time with feedback or anything, and you don't really know what you're doing. And she's kind of doesn't really know, she hasn't really connected with anybody. So I think she is confusing sort of teacherly approval and sort of actually fancying someone, I think.
Listen, you're talking to the queen of approval. Like, literally, if you can give me a sticker with it, like some kind of gold star at the end of this to say what a great podcast, I'll be like, yes, great, fantastic, that's it, we're in love.
Great, I'll keep that in mind.
Can I just say though, like everything you just said, Caroline, is exactly what I mean about like your writing style and how good you are at doing like character traits. just you saying like she would have thrived in secondary school. I'm like, yes, like somebody that would thrive off structure. Like how, just these thoughts that you have. I'm like, I listen and I'm like, you just are like, you know, people so well, like down to the T. And I don't know. Yeah, I love it. It's again,
well, I love this. This is very nice.
It's just me basically like expressing my love for you. Now I have just clocked the time and I'm really sad. But I wanted to quickly slip in a question. Obviously, the Rachel incident is, and I don't want to get this wrong, so please tell me, it has been optioned?
Yes, it is. Yes, but here's the thing. So, I mean, your fucking groceries receipt has been an option, man. Like, these options, they're all flying around the place. Like.
But what do you like? What do you hope for the TV adaptation? And will you kind of have involvement in that? Do you want to stay like attached to it, or?
So here's what I can tell you. It's been,
okay.
And all of this information will be out of date in 1 year. And because that's just the way the industry goes, I'm learning. So it's been optioned by Elliot Page's production company over at Universal Studios, which is very exciting. I have written the first episode, and I hope if they carry on with it, if they greenlight it, rather, I'll sort of write subsequent episodes as well. But yeah, like it's funny because casting will be difficult, I think, if it ever comes to that, because like all these characters are supposed to be like 20, 21, and generally it's difficult to get people of that age who are like names. So yeah, I would be nice, I guess, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like if it doesn't go ahead, like I'm gonna start a riot. So but it's just such a good book, and it's so vivid, and I can totally see it being adapted. And you know, as we've said before, like we're just saying we're both actors, so if
I can't do an Irish accent just now, but give me some time.
Well, you could definitely be those bookshop girls at the end. They're fun.
Yes. I could totally do that. Right?
Yeah, they're all just really posh, I think. I mean,
no, we can't.
Related to Princess Anne or something.
We don't do posh. We're so working class. It hurts.
I'll betray my working class roots just for you.
Yeah, no, I think like you guys can do like RP. It's just weird when they try and do your accents.
That's true.
That's generally the way it goes.
True. You can smell it a mile away.
Yeah, you really can.
I'm really sad that we've got to let you go, but Caroline,
I'm sad too. I would love to just sit here and receive compliments for another hour.
Yeah, I really hope that this episode isn't just me complimenting you, but let's be honest, it probably is.
No, it was a wonderful interview, and it's really made me think about the book in new ways. And I'm still very early on in the interview process for this book, so it's been lovely to get the kind of gears moving about it. You know,
thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And listeners, the Rachel incident is out on the 22nd of June. And I will pop a link in the show notes. Caroline, can our listeners follow you anywhere?
Yes. The only place I'm really doing anything on anymore is Instagram, and I have a very unintelligible Instagram name. It's Zaronline. It's CZARONLINE.
Fabulous.
And obviously, Sentimental Garbage goes out every Thursday.
Yes.
Of course.
And I will be dead cringe and link a few of my favorite episodes in the show notes.
What are your favorite episodes?
My favorite episodes are, I loved Girl Bossing with Ortega.
Oh, I love that
Acting
one.
Like I Know Her. I loved, I listened to Dirty Dancing yesterday with Curtis Sittenfeld. So good. Obviously loved the Sentimental and the City stuff. I loved reality TV with Pandora Sykes.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Yeah.
I just promised to watch at least one episode of Sex and the
Please
City.
do.
Oh, I wonder what the one episode would be. Oh,
I don't know. I need your recommendation.
So the one episode that I made Gav watch, and he thought it was great, was My Motherboard Myself, which is the one where Miranda's mother dies.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a great one.
Everyone listening will know that's up my street already. So I'm like, yeah.
Is that the one where she eats cake out the bin?
No, that's not the one where she eats cake out the bin. Although another great moment for Cynthia Nixon. But when I made Gav watch My Motherboard Myself, he just like had his arms folded the entire time, and then he went, Cynthia Nixon is a national treasure, and then he left the room.
She literally is.
Amazing.
She is. Oh my goodness. Oh, Caroline, I love you. I love your podcast. I love this
love
book.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. And listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe, as it helps us to reach more listeners. You can also follow us at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. Thank you so much for listening. Go buy the Rachel Incident ASAP Rocky. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.